Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, Chamber of Digital Commerce, for inviting me to speak today. We're gathered here to discuss innovation and the future of emerging technology. I'm honored to speak at this important event, and I'm here to tell you that FinCEN supports innovation. We support virtual asset service providers and other emerging technology companies, and at the same time, we reject the notion that innovation and competitive advantage must come at the expense of complying with America's AML CFT framework. My hope is that you're already familiar with my agency, FinCEN, from our leading role in the application of AML CFT regulations to virtual assets. Early on, FinCEN recognized the importance of this nascent but growing sector of our financial system and issued guidance clarifying AML CFT expectations for transactions in virtual assets. My hope is that you're also familiar with my division, which fields whistleblower tips, supports supervisory work, and imposes civil money penalties through enforcement actions. FinCEN has been at the forefront of ensuring that virtual asset service companies meet their obligations under the Bank Secrecy Act, issuing 7 enforcement actions since publishing that initial guidance over a decade ago. These actions make clear that services like money transmission are covered by the BSA, irrespective of the technology used to deliver those services. And although we support innovation, we support responsible innovation. We support responsible innovation that increases efficiency, creates more choice for consumers and businesses, and showcases the ingenuity of American founders and investors. Such innovation can be achieved without creating a haven for money laundering and illicit activity. Such innovation can be achieved while complying with US law. Preserving the integrity of our nation's financial system and protecting national security, the goals of America's AML CFT regime, is a high-stakes proposition. Our goal is to maintain a level playing field where covered actors are required to play by the rules. If they want to do business in the United States and get no competitive advantage from skirting their obligations. Compliance with these rules simply must be embedded in the DNA of your company from ideation to launch. The historic enforcement action against Binance shows, in detail, how a company can get it wrong, building a corporate culture that seeks to evade regulation rather than embrace it, attempting to hide your US ties rather than taking full advantage of the market, designing controls only to have your most lucrative clients not be subject to them, in effect, creating a playground for illicit actors. The Binance action resulted in a $3.4 billion civil money penalty, the highest penalty in Treasury and FinCEN history. But that is not the end of the story. Binance is also required to undertake substantial compliance enhancements that will be overseen through a 5-year monitorship, the first of its kind overseeing a virtual assets service provider like Binance. These compliance undertakings are also reinforced through a suspended penalty, which would be collected if Binance fails to comply. Previously, such monitorships were reserved for traditional fiat financial institutions. No more. If you are approaching your compliance commitment solely as a cost-benefit analysis and you're wagering that you'll make more money than whatever penalty might be imposed for failure to comply, you should check your math. How much is it worth to you not to have your brand be associated with processing transactions involving terrorist finance, child sexual abuse material, ransomware attackers, and other illicit actors? How much is it worth to you to not have compliance commitments imposed on you by government agencies, not to mention a suspended penalty hanging over your head? How much is it worth to you for your executives not to face the threat of being held individually liable in civil and even criminal proceedings? Because while this case began years ago with parallel investigations initiated by FinCEN and IRSCI, the ultimate resolution of the case was a true whole-of-government effort involving our partners at OFAC, CFTC, and multiple components within DOJ and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington. Because at the end of the day, Binance's willful violations of U.S. AML CFT laws were a direct result of their decision to prioritize growth over compliance and take steps to avoid rather than embrace their AML CFT responsibilities. Our consent order goes into great detail here, but while Binance famously claimed to be located nowhere, the company later admitted it was doing business in the United States and therefore was required, but failed to comply with AML CFT requirements. as Binance discovered the hard way, ties to a jurisdiction and corresponding compliance obligations cannot simply be swept under the rug. Notably, we continue to see other actors attempt to sweep jurisdictional ties under the rug. Just as Binance claimed to be from nowhere, today we frequently see service providers claiming that they are decentralized in an attempt to avoid their obligations under the BSA. Let me be clear. Your obligations under the BSA are based on your activity. What you call yourself does not change your obligations. Similarly, part of Binance's growth involved customers' ability to access their platform without conducting appropriate know your customer policies, procedures, and internal controls. This included creating nested exchanges in effect, where unknown to Binance entities could access the Binance trading platform and directly make nearly unlimited trades. As a result, Binance held accounts for and executed transactions related to all manner of illicit activity talked about previously. Critically, Binance was also slow to react. Even when these issues became known to Binance personnel, the company culture of avoiding its responsibilities resulted in a failure to take timely and proportionate action in the face of egregious levels of risk. Binance also expanded its products and services to cover virtual assets it couldn't monitor effectively. For example, it offered anonymity-enhanced cryptocurrencies without appropriate due diligence and transaction monitoring. However, as we noted in the Binance action, and Bittrex, BitMEX, and other enforcement actions before it, if your blockchain analytic tools don't cover all of your products and services, you face significant risk of facilitating illicit financial activity and having your brand associated with some of the parade of horribles I mentioned earlier. Not only does this illustrate the danger of not embedding AML principles in product decisions, but it also highlights the distinction between privacy and anonymity. Most public distributed ledger technology brings with it an advantage in transparency. Knowledge of transactions on a blockchain grows over time as more information is available and empowers individuals and financial institutions to make better compliance decisions. This kind of transparency is net positive. But there are critical distinctions between privacy and anonymity. There can certainly be legitimate reasons for why responsible actors might want to conduct financial transactions in a secure and private manner. We recognize that, but we grow concerned when we see transactions creep closer to anonymity in an effort to make the flow of funds completely untraceable. This distinction is important, and Binance's violations show the dangers of this latter issue of anonymity when appropriate controls are not in place. Treasury's authorities to enforce AML CFT laws are broad, reaching a wide range of misconduct, and can apply to both US and foreign persons. Accordingly, wherever located, virtual asset service providers with BSA obligations should, like any other financial institution, ensure they adopt a managerial commitment to compliance at the very top, and that routinely updated risk-based programs and controls are integrated effectively into their platforms and technology from day one onward. I spent a lot of time talking about Binance because of the significance of the action and the egregiousness of their past conduct. But there are a lot of takeaways from Binance and the body of enforcement actions that came before it. Technological innovation and AML CFT compliance must go hand in hand. The best way to make this work is incorporating compliance principles at the conceptual, design, test, and implementation stages of new technologies and products. A financial institution, particularly one that experiences significant changes or growth to its business model, can't reasonably fulfill its responsibilities if AML isn't incorporated before the launch of new products or expansion into new markets. We recognize that exactly how such embedding of AML takes place will necessarily vary from institution to institution. But what shouldn't happen is a complete disconnect or siloing between AML compliance and the business people who make these decisions. This interconnectivity should go a long way to preventing a culture of non-compliance. Embedding AML compliance necessarily precludes taking a generic or static approach, because unfortunately, the innovation we see isn't just coming from new products and services that your industry launches, but also from illicit actors who are constantly changing their approaches and looking for areas of weakness to exploit. To that end, a financial institution can't assume that a copy and paste of an untailored program from another institution or even another business line will suffice. What is common across financial institutions is the need to ensure controls are tailored to your company's identified risks. Doing so necessarily requires a current understanding of illicit finance risks and a similarly dynamic approach to your program. This necessarily requires appropriate resourcing. The best designed controls in the world can't be effective if they lack support and maintenance. The good news is that we see industry responding. For example, there are positive upward trends in the SAR filings we've received on virtual assets. In 2022, the total number of SARs filed on virtual assets since 2012 was around 300,000. In 2023, only 1 year later, we saw that the number of filings grew over 70% to over 500,000. Importantly, 95% of these filings came from virtual asset service providers. It's pretty impressive. In our most recent year in review, we highlighted just a fraction of some cases that relied on BSA data and nominated them for law enforcement awards. We highlighted that hundreds of financial institutions supported those prosecutions through BSA filings, just that small fraction. This, taken together, shows that virtual asset service providers and other financial institutions are taking up the charge to provide critically important data to our law enforcement colleagues who are on the front lines protecting our nation's financial system from illicit actors. Before I close, I want to reiterate my office's approach to enforcement. As our public enforcement actions demonstrate, we continue to prioritize cases where we identify significant noncompliance and threats to the U.S. financial system, cases where we see a willful disregard for regulatory requirements. This means that if you are actually trying to get it right, that counts for a lot. On the other hand, if you're expending a lot of effort to look as though you comply by drafting robust AML CFT compliance programs you never implement, a so-called paper program, that also counts for a lot. If you're ignoring egregious levels of risk associated with your offerings, if you're, quote, setting it and forgetting it, unquote, that also counts for a lot. If your version of innovation is finding novel ways to avoid your obligations, that really counts for a lot. I want to thank you all for coming today and reiterate that keeping illicit activity out of the virtual asset sector also helps instill confidence in the financial system by ensuring that the public, including customers in the virtual asset ecosystem, can feel comfortable that their assets and their transactions will be secure, and that they won't be taken advantage of by bad actors, including criminals or malign state actors. We're optimistic and excited for the future of the financial system, and I'm confident that working together, the public and private sector can foster an environment that not only encourages innovation, but also leads to a safer and more secure environment for all participants. This is accomplished when we align our goals and recognize that compliance isn't optional or selective, but is an integral component of developing the next generation of financial services and technology. Thank you again for inviting me today.